We all know the internet is a complete game changer, and in many ways this book could not have been possible without it. If the contents of this book and this presentation are true, it also presents a new dilemma, and that is, what then is our reality? For the purpose of this argument, we'll call everything that we have been told the big lie. The big lie is an attack upon reality. It undermines and dissolves reality until that reality just collapses. The big lie is very potent, and lately it is more and more difficult to counter. The power we need to counter the big lie is to have a true understanding of ourselves. The individual nature of our existence is the spiritual dignity of the human being. To deny the spirit of the individual and instead focus solely on materialism is to become trapped in the big lie. If we want to understand the nature of truth, we need to have incorruptible wisdom. We need to develop a new kind of human wisdom with all its varied aspects. To counter the big lie, we need to have a true picture of the threefold human being. That is, the universal understanding of mind, body, and spirit. We also need to know who is spreading the big lie. The first casualty of war is truth. At the core of Sun Tzu's Art of War is that acknowledgement. All warfare is based on deception. Similarly, the Israeli Mossad's motto is, "By way of deception, thou shalt do war." The truth about false flag operations, starting wars, and other violent acts always threatens the criminals responsible for them. But silence and consent serve to enhance the criminal's aura of immunity and invincibility. We are entering an age when we can increase our own knowledge and power. And when you decide to undertake this quest, you too will bear the responsibility of reining in those who seem intent upon murder, deception, terror, and war. To divide, conquer, terrorize, trick, and deceive is emblematic of evil intent. The secret section is an attempt to raise the veil and let's see who's behind the curtain. Part of the disinformation used by the Anglo-American moneyed elite in order to influence and manipulate government officials is the argument that what they do for the sake of democracy and nature building helps everyone. We've all heard their sound bites like the trickle-down economy, or we are the job creators and taxing the rich will hurt the economy. They actively remind politicians, particularly when making campaign contributions, that it is they who are the financiers and corporate heads who help keep the world going round. Along the lines of, what is good for GM is good for America, and what's good for America is good for GM. To be sure, the capitalistic pyramid is structured to benefit the elite first and foremost. The entire system of mass media in America, from mainstream radio to both small and large screens, are owned and operated by a select few megacorporations that are in the business of colluding to keep the American public from figuring out what they are and their partners in both private sectors are up to. Since the 1950s, the CIA has had agents in the largest media organizations under the guise of Operation Mockingbird to monitor the news and censor stories if need be. This illustration is a great way of seeing how they can manipulate our viewpoint. Just try being a journalist that works for one of these really large media monopolies and attempt illustrating conspiracies. If coming even remotely close to exposing the real establishment, or its true agenda, and see how long it is that you keep your job. Of course, there is the internet and independent media like Steve Jones at The Guardian, and I've often told him, you're among the last true journalists in this country who can actually make a difference, but he doesn't work for NBC. If he did, it might be a totally different story. By an overwhelming majority of media is controlled in this country by only 6 corporations. That means they're meeting behind closed doors, and a board of directors for 6 companies are deciding what we are going to learn and know about the world we live in. It is all in this perspective. Mostly not your perspective or how you view things, but more so in the perspective that the media shows you. Richard Nixon infamously said, "The American people don't believe anything until they see it on television." It also means the mass media can manipulate our opinions by leaving information out. What is not shown or said speaks volumes. A few years after the First World War, now we're going to take off on a tangent here. The secret German Vril Society was formed to study the use of Vril energy, or zero-point energy, and other speculative free energy devices. Vril is the German term meaning cosmic basic energy. The Vril Society also took up the study of ancient Indian texts describing the Vimana flying craft. Using information from psychic mediums, the pre-Nazi Germans called this research psychophysical technology. The Vril Society was known to investigate the physical properties of space and time. The Germans pushed the psychic envelope and got what they wished for over a decade before the Nazis ascended to power. Soon after the Third Reich came to power, they established the first state-sponsored psychic research program. It's called the Ananurbi Society and also the Thule Society. Before the end of World War II, even as far back as the 1930s, scientists of the Third Reich had acquired and were backward engineering a hyperdimensional torsion-based technology they called the Bell. That was basically the last photo we saw, some plans for UFO crafts in the 1930s and 40s. It was developed at a secret base in what is today the Czech Republic. It was Nazi Germany's most highly classified and radically advanced secret weapons research program. The Bell was classified uniquely within the Third Reich, an even higher top secret classification than their atomic bomb project. The Nazis regarded the Bell as a gateway technology to seemingly unlimited expansion of human brain potential, leading to technological power and superiority. It contained 2 counter-rotating cylinders filled with a substance similar to mercury that glowed violet when activated, known only as Xeron 525. Subsequent levitation craft advances between 1941 and 1944 spawned the Honeybu series of Third Reich saucer fleet. The Nazis investigated the potential application of this torsion-based technology as a means to tap into zero-point energy, which I'm going to talk a little bit more later, which is basically harnessing free energy. But zero-point energy, which the Nazi Third Reich scientists described as the energy of the physical medium of space-time itself. The Bell UFO craft was also studied as a means to manipulate gravity, to be used as an advanced prototypical field propulsion technology. Because of the demented Nazi mentality, their scientists were also looking into the means for the ultimate, potentially planet-busting weapon. Thank God they were defeated. But we still have some Nazi mentality here today. The conceptual key to the advancement of these effects was the manipulation of rotating magnetic fields by means of counter rotation of plasma within the device itself. A lot of people don't know this, but immediately following World War II, from 1945 to 1955, Operation Paperclip granted nearly 1,000 German scientists American citizenship. Many had been longtime members of the Nazi Party and the Gestapo and had conducted experiments on humans at concentration camps and committed other war crimes. The scientists ended up in the U.S. military-industrial complex, worked for the CIA, NASA, and other agencies. One of the Nazi experiments that continued in America was mind control, known as the CIA's MK-Ultra. Such was the beginning of the secret government within the government. Just as with the official government, the shadow government has functional branches. However, unlike the official government, the purpose of the various branches of the shadow government is simply to distribute different covert functions, but not to achieve a system of checks and balances as was supposed to happen constitutionally between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the U.S. government. That is because the shadow government is the creation of a powerful elite who need not fear being dominated by an instrument of their own creation. I know this is pretty heavy stuff, but bear with me, it gets better. Post-World War II, we see the rise of the control groups. The most notorious being the Bilderberg Group, which takes its name from a hotel in Holland where the first meeting took place in May 1954, and since then they have met every year in complete secrecy. Every 4 years the group meets in the United States where there is an upcoming presidential election. They met in 2012 on Thursday, May 31st until Monday morning, June 4th at Westfield Marriott, Washington, Dulles in Chantilly, Virginia, which is a snob resort a short distance from Dulles International Airport. Their work is pretty much completed by Saturday. Sunday and Monday are merely farewell breakfasts. The Bilderberg Group is so incensed at the constant exposure it receives when it meets in Europe that this cabal is considering the unprecedented step of holding its 2013 confab in the United States for the second year running, primarily because the castrated U.S. media affords all 120 of the world's most powerful people meeting secret with virtual anonymity. According to David Rockefeller in the February 1st, 1999 edition of Newsweek International, he said, "Somebody has got to take government's place, and business to me seems to be a logical entity to do that." Actually, no, Dave, because that's called fascism, and our grandfathers already had a real bad time with that back in the 1930s and 40s. The real movers and shakers of the world collude covertly to start and stop wars, manipulate the stock markets, maintain class distinctions, and even censor the news. Please consider seriously the reason why these elite industrialists and their institutions are not discussed in the mainstream press, despite the immense financial and political power they wield. It appears they are dangerous psychopaths running the Western world right now. They have bought off nearly all politicians in America and in Western Europe. They own the media. And perhaps most scary, they also own the aerospace and weapons manufacturers. How much does the public know about weapons in space? What about chemtrails? Or what about the many HARP arrays around the world that can alter the weather? Not much. Instead, we know far more about Charlie Sheen's sex life and the slow mental decline of Lindsay Lohan. Do we even know what exactly is masked behind the cloak of national security? If the Germans were working on top secret anti-gravity craft 70 years ago, what advanced propulsion craft might exist by today's standards? We already have the means to travel to the stars. But these technologies are locked up in the black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do, he said. And he said this on his deathbed, like so many other whistleblowers. He couldn't come forward with this, but then he realized that the people that are holding these secrets are far more dangerous than telling the world that we actually have this stuff. Some UFO researchers say the vast majority of sightings like this these days are not of ET origin at all, but crafts we have already built ourselves with acquired technology through backward engineering. Since the 1950s, the US government has been using nuclear-powered tunneling machines called nuclear subterranes. It rhymes with submarine, which were designed at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. The subterrane can melt through rock at 8 kilometers per hour, creating perfectly straight tunnels to be used for high-speed trains connecting a multitude of underground cities as it burrows through the rock hundreds of meters below the surface. Nuclear subterranes work by melting their way through the rock and soil, actually vitrifying it as they go, leaving no tailing mounds and producing a neat, solidly glass-lined tunnel behind them. The secret US government, at the cost of untold trillions of dollars of undocumented taxpayer debt, has been funneled into these black projects to build these underground bases that so few people even know about. Today, unbeknownst to most citizens, there is an extensive network of underground bases below North America, costing untold trillions and comprising the largest construction project in human history. Yet hardly anybody knows these underground bases even exist. I get asked the question sometimes, what can I do to counter this? Free your mind from bias, indoctrination, and ignorance. Assist in the unlocking of other minds, and I guarantee you, the tides will turn in our favor. Don't wait for the corporate-controlled media to inform and explain. In fact, they can't. Read and listen to everything within reach and search for sources of alternative information on the internet, in documentaries, in old library books, and unconventional bookstores. Read and watch things you normally wouldn't. Then quietly contemplate. Use that God-given supercomputer called your brain to discern right from wrong. Perhaps most important, feel what's right within your heart, your soul, and your innermost being. And remember to always ask the ultimate question, what is truth? The system that has essentially brainwashed us for centuries has now empowered the very victims of the tyranny to defend it. It's mind-boggling when you actually step back and think about it. So how can we cut through the lies and the disinformation? The turning of the tide can be a subtle thing at first, but eventually change becomes undeniable. That is what is happening now with the powerful family cabals that have been secretly ruling the West through control of the creation and distribution of money. These people have already lost the ability to control the future of this planet and are now barely clinging to power, but they still are. The key to their loss was the spreading of the truth, for the truth shall set us free. But since it thrives in the dark, we should shine a light of disclosure on the full spectrum of black operations. Citizens can demand the end of the constitutional practice of allowing black budget items. The end of unpublished secret executive orders and national security directives. The end of the practice of indefinitely sustained presidential declarations of national emergency as is currently in place. The end of the Federal Reserve notes and the return to the gold and silver standard to back the dollar. The end to government domestic spying on its own citizens. An extreme, severe reduction or elimination in the number, staffing, and scope of the endlessly proliferating intelligence agencies, which are an anachronism since the Cold War has ended, and an end to the CIA and DEA collusion in allowing and continuing a stream of drugs to pour into this country. If you don't feel like taking action, that's okay. Just be aware of the things that I'm telling you is very important. But it is time to take our country back.